when you look at the industry as a whole, like what is missing that stands out to you most? And I guess, how do you plan to answer that and the opportunities it's going to present towards this specific company? Hey, everyone. Welcome to our latest TDR Cannabis Exclusive. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Thanks for coming back and checking in. Last week, we had on Nicholas Vita. He's the CEO of the Cannabist Company Holdings. We want to find out more about the team that he's put in play, the thinking minds that are behind it. So this is the Cannabis Show Part 2, as we welcome in. He is the Chief Commercial Officer of, like I said, the Cannabist Holdings Company, Jesse Channon. Am I pronouncing the last name correctly?
I mean, it's Shannon, close enough.
Shannon.
Yep.
Nice to meet you. Almost 4 years now since you joined the company, but quite the background that you had prior to getting into cannabis. But if you had to sum it up in one sentence in 4 years in cannabis, what would you say?
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
So many things. Yeah, I would just go with ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a lot of growth, that's for sure.
Yeah.
When I bring up the whole idea of like what you've done, your background, digital marketing was obviously something that you have a strong presence and understanding in. You worked and advised for brands that included some of the biggest in the world: Microsoft, AT&T, Starbucks, media company NBC, as I said, Starbucks, Red Bull as well, which I'm curious to see if there's a lot of similarities working on a Red Bull brand as it is with the cannabis industry. But it's always fascinating to hear what people did prior to getting involved in this industry. So what's your observation, I think, when you look at this space and how much it's grown in the 4 years that you've been here, and what the growth potential is, even from a branding perspective pertaining to this industry?
Yeah, look, it's incredible. I mean, so my background, like you mentioned, I started very early on in social. So was working on Facebook before there was a news feed, right? And what we saw early on was that was going to be a shift in the way that people communicated. There was no question, and it was exciting and it was fun to work on because at that time everybody had this idea that companies like Facebook were these behemoths, right? And really, you'd go into their office and it was like 50 engineers at that time, and they're serving 100 million people, and you're like, what is happening, right? So when I came to cannabis, fast forward, I come to cannabis and it was very similar. 4 years ago, you walked into these companies, and at the time, Columbia Care had just posted, or was right around posting like a $75 million a year. It's like $75 million. That's a lot of money. And then you look around, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's nothing here. Like we're building this from the ground up, right? And so, and when I say nothing here, like incredibly nascent systems, like really early partner ecosystem with a lot of people trying to figure stuff out. Regulatory has come a long way in the last 4 years, but even still, there's things that we can't do from like an advertising, marketing, branding, even a retail experiential point of view that is so just commonplace for other industries, that when I talk to friends who are working at those other companies or who are, engaged in those sort of efforts, like, what do you mean you can't do that? I'm like, oh, no, I can't do that. Like, we're not allowed to buy that inventory. We can't be there. We have to have this sort of design when it comes to the physical infrastructure of a retail store. So we're making it up as we go. And it's
I think in some ways too, though, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's like, figure out what this industry is about, figure out what the culture is, figure out what the consumers want, because it's brand new. And before we get, let's say, legislation where we get rescheduling in play, safe banking, let's say all these things come to fruition, it's like a lot of this hard work and research that we've done, maybe in a lot of ways we could probably upscale this industry the right way before, getting, I guess, maybe too aggressive and getting ahead of ourselves. Do you believe in some of that?
I do. I mean, I think if you look again in the parallels, right? If you think about, just taking the internet as an example, right? If you look back at the adoption and sort of the curve of something like radio versus TV versus what happened with the internet and then what ultimately happened with social, the one thing that you see is that those hockey sticks shrunk, right? Like the adoption was exponentially faster for every iteration after that. And I think part of that comes from, those leaps become shorter intervals because people are A, more accustomed at that point to a leap, but B, you learn the lessons from the past. You learn what worked and what didn't. And so in an industry where we are sort of this sum of our parts, where it's like part CPG, part, pharmaceutical, part, agricultural science company, part just scrappy startup and technology company, there's a lot of parallels that you can look at and say, well, a lot of people spend a lot of money to know what works in retail and what works in agriculture and what works in supply chain. And so we do kind of have that advantage.
Yeah,
So
that's
so I mean, your story is pretty well known around the sector. I mean, a lot of people know Columbia Care when we're talking about MSOs. I know that you just went through the brand change or
Yeah.
the name change
Yep.
with the Cannabist. Can you kind of walk us through, I guess, the thought process of what led up to that
Yeah.
and like how you landed and what the Cannabist stands for ultimately as the forward-facing brand
yeah.
of the business?
Yeah. I mean, look, I always tell sort of like the same story, but when I started early on, I went and toured a bunch of states. And one of the first states I toured was Florida. And we had just built a lot of these really pretty Columbia Care stores, but the regulatory is super tight there, especially, 4 years ago,
Yeah.
3 years ago, right? And so the signage on the outside just said Columbia Care. And I remember I was sitting with David Hart, who's our president and chief operating officer. We're driving down the road, and I looked at David. I was like, bro, I don't know what that company does, but I know it doesn't sell weed. I can tell you that right now. That's an insurance company. I don't know what Columbia Care does, right?
Yeah.
And so we knew, we were like, Columbia Care was the perfect brand to get us to where we were. It was great for the application process. It sounded professional. It sounded medical.
Yeah.
It was great to get licenses. But where we are today, the platform that exists today, the consumers that we serve today, and even our employees, right? Like what they're passionate about, we sell one plant, right? Like that's it. Like, and so when we rebranded the retail in 21, we went through a bunch of exercises and we said, look, let's just name it after the people. Like the people that work in this company, what are they? They're passionate. They're like sommeliers of weed. That's a cannabist. And so we'll just call it cannabis, right? Like if you want to come in and you want to talk to somebody who is really excited to be there, that's a great architecture. And so when we were rebranding the whole company, we knew that's the direction we wanted to go for years. But then with the, with sort of the hold period, with the potential acquisition, the integration with Cresco, out of respect for that process, you hold off on a lot of things. You don't want to create redundancies and invest bad money. So when that broke, it was kind of a no-brainer. It was like, all right, let's get back to work and get this thing rebranded.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I actually didn't think about that. That makes a lot of sense actually from the Cannabist point of view. I mean, speaking about retail, obviously your background's digital.
Yeah.
When people look at the cannabis industry at large, I mean, they think it's heavily predicated and heavily marketed to brick and mortar. How much emphasis do you put on e-commerce internally, and how heavy are you guys leaning on that to really drive consumer decisions and really ultimately be that sales funnel moving forward?
It's a great question. Well, as we know, as I mentioned already, the things that we have available to us and the partner ecosystems and even just the execution that you can do as a consumer, not the same.
Yeah.
So e-commerce doesn't really fully exist for us, right, as a national platform. But it does from a consumer engagement platform, to your point of view, right?
Yes.
And so we have this saying, like the cornerstone of everything that we did with the build out for Cannabist, and when you look at platforms that we built internally, like Forage and other things, empathetic education, right? Like meet people where they are, try to make things to where they're fun, but they're not intimidating, because dispensaries can be kind of intimidating, so like you want to try to soften them up a bit. And I think the key to welcoming the new consumers into this space is to just have a very relaxed, empathetic, education-focused platform. So when I think about e-commerce right now, I think about consumer engagement, right? It's not about creating a transaction. It's about creating an opportunity to engage with them, whether that is to educate or for them to pre-order or whatever it may be. It's like, great, we have a shot to engage with this consumer. What are we trying to get across? And I think the things that we should be trying to get across are recommendations for products that align with the outcome that they're going for. That's why we built Forage.
Yeah, what I look go ahead, Anthony.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say in regards to Forage, I know that Dama came out and they acquired Candid AI last week, which I'm assuming they're going to leverage as some sort of AI suggestion engine in their e-commerce. I'm assuming that's what you guys built Forage for internally. It's more or less.
It's funny. My sort of outlook on development in this space or in any other is that the things that we build internally, when you have a rich sort of partner ecosystem, which we do, a lot of people that are raising money or have raised money to try to build these solutions, the things that we should build internally should not be just for any reason. They should specifically be for something that is either gives us a proprietary advantage or that there's not enough money in it yet for someone to raise money and go build it for us. And Forage was a great example. At that time, recommendation engines you had Leafly and you had these other systems, there wasn't enough of a use case to take people off of the bridges that they were already on, which is we're trying to build menu systems and we're trying to build point of sale. And it's like, all right, well, then we're going to build this. And so when we built Forage, then it became, we had a bunch of partners come to us. Can we license that from you? Like, well, no, we didn't really build it for that. Like, we wanted to program it to use it internally at our stores. If you go in the touch screens and everything, Forage is powered on all of those. And then we wanted to also build it for external. So it is no surprise now that people are building it and acquiring companies that are doing it. Probably would have saved me some time and money like 2.5 years ago if they would have done that already. But that's always been our focus, is to build connective tissue that gives us an advantage in that engagement cycle.
Do you think as the industry grows, that the point of purchase is going to be a lot different from when people consume, or not consume, but purchase alcohol? Because alcohol, like, I don't know what the e-commerce platform looks like, but everybody's going into a store and buying alcohol all the time. But when it comes to cannabis, if you have a first-time consumer, they're coming into a dispensary. Do you see that happening over and over and over? Or do you think it just, like to Anthony's point, becomes more and more about e-commerce?
I think it'll be a little bit different for a while, like for, let's say, a generation of consumer, right? And the reason why I believe that is because there's so much legacy usage and sort of knowledge around alcohol by the time you come to an age where you're going to be using an online platform, right? So let's say, like, you live in New York, you use Drizzly, it brings it to your apartment, right? Like, no brainer. So that is a buying platform, not a shopping platform. Like, I would be willing to wager that the vast majority of their queries are looking for something specific, and then it lists a number of stores that have it and how quickly they can get it to you, and you make a decision, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that part of that is because, we all grew up from generations where, your parents may be having a drink with dinner or on the weekend, or you're entertaining, or they're having a party, or you go to college, and you start to create consumption behaviors that are fairly well informed, but are also branded, right? So it's like, my dad drank Johnny Walker. I know that's for a special occasion. It's a special occasion. I'm buying Johnny Walker, right? We don't have that, or some do, but the vast majority of Americans do not have that sort of legacy in their consumer behavior. So when we have new consumers that are coming in, maybe they smoked in college and they don't even remember what it was called. They just know that it was weed, right? And they smoked it, and now they want to get back into it. And so they're not thinking about strains. They're not thinking about terpene profiles. They're not thinking about, well, what's the difference between a fast-acting edible versus a regular one? Or, what do you mean that edible is going to last longer from a metabolizing point of view? Like, none of these things come up in conversation on like a day-to-day basis 5 years ago. So we are educating an entire consumer base that now the next generation of shoppers will start to draft off of that a bit.
So with that, and with having the bud tenders kind of being your, I don't want to say first line of defense, but I mean, they're very influential. They're very influential in guiding the consumer to ultimately purchase the product. How much emphasis do you guys put internally on bud tender education and constantly keeping them up to I guess, be with like the best practices and really what they should be doing at the point of retail?
So look, we have a great retail organization. We have a great retail leadership. So they do put a lot of emphasis on that. I think everybody can always do better. We're actually exploring some new tools right now that we want to implement. That 18-month hold period, right? When you're talking about like an acquisition, you really do pause a lot of things. And so, some of that comes in development. There's a number of things that happen there. There was a plan for part of the administrative back end of Forage to actually act as a learning tool as well for the associate. Okay. But, we went hands down on keyboard for almost 2 years. So now we have to rethink how we approach that. But we're super focused on that. I mean, I think if you're not focused on that, you're doing yourself an incredible disservice, because I think the retail experiences that will separate themselves moving forward are the ones that put the consumer in the middle of the decision when it comes to merchandising, third-party products, stuff like that. Just get the best stuff on shelf and make people happy. And then on the other side of it is, what are you doing to make them better consumers, to help educate them, to push them through that growth curve as quickly as possible so that they can start enjoying more of the products. And we're incredibly focused on that second part for sure.
A lot of people we've spoken to internally at the company said that you're actually spearheading a lot of this rebrand that's involved with this company, and that your extensive background within digital marketing. When you look at the industry as a whole, like, what is missing that stands out to you most And I guess, how do you plan to answer that and the opportunities it's going to present towards this specific company?
Um, I mean, specifically on the branding side, right? I think it's accessibility for the consumer is a huge issue, right? So how is it that they can engage and interact with your brand, and how normalized can you make that experience across markets, across states, to where things start to feel familiar? There's a lot of really cool brands in our space, right? Like we have
Yeah.
brands, we have some great brands, right? There are other companies that have some amazing brands, and a lot of them
Yeah.
are stuck in like single states or a small number of states. It's really tough to be a multi-state brand. I would love to help fix that problem, and we're actively engaged in conversations with a number of the large third-party multi-state brands to try to be a partner. Like, I feel like we owe that to the consumer. So we're going to
Yeah.
try to figure out ways to get more of these great brands into more markets, especially east of the Mississippi, that historically haven't had them. I think for the other MSOs, they probably struggle with the same thing, which is, how do you create this normalized? We operate 9 retail banners right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
we have
That's
86 stores. I think we have this.
Are they going to be consolidated under the Cannabist?
They have to be, right?
Okay.
Responsibly. Like, at some
Yeah.
point, when it makes sense, both from a CapEx point of view as well as from a brand equity point of view. But
Yeah.
it's difficult to run that many banners. There is lost efficiency in that. There's no question. And so, when you look across the country, we have probably 4 of those banners are 3 or less locations. So that's an easy win, right? So you wipe off half the banners, but then you have great legacy brands like G Leaf and The Green Solution and Medicine Man and Project Cannabis. You
Yeah.
have to be a bit more thoughtful about how you do those things. And I think you have to be
Yeah.
committed to trying to preserve some of their legacy, either through product, brand, or other ways that you can activate. Cannabist should be the retail platform. And with the exception of Florida, where you have to put the name on the bottle, there should never be a
Yeah.
product called Cannabist. There just shouldn't.
Mm.
Yeah, man, I didn't really think about that. The Green Solution really is kind of like a cornerstone brand in Colorado.
It is.
But they've got their own. I'm pretty sure they've got their own internal brands.
They do.
So that banner can live. That banner can still live at the point of retail, even with the Cannabist on the front door. So I mean, I guess we've seen a lot of growth in markets. Obviously, we're seeing adult use markets convert. Hopefully, Ohio. Hopefully,
Yep.
Florida, New York. You guys have a good footprint. I know it's medical right now, and I'm sure they'll flip to adult use in the future. Which markets are getting you excited on a national scale? Like, what markets are you like excited to go into and then start to fight for market share with the consumer?
I won't call anybody out by name, but I had someone one time be like, like, nobody can say who their favorite kid is, but I only have one that goes to private school, right? So it's, like, I love all of our markets, but there are some that present different opportunities commercially. There's no question. I mean, Virginia is the first one that's going to come up with everybody right now. Like, everybody looks at Virginia, right? We own more than half the state. And the way in which that one is constructed, because of both the G Leaf and the Legacy Columbia Care, the cannabis license in those regions, we have an incredible opportunity to build something special, right? To create sort of a presence that is really valuable to the consumer and really build that brand in that sort of Mid-Atlantic region. I love the facility in Pennsylvania. Like, I'll put that one up there. That Saxon facility in Pennsylvania has the opportunity to be a really, really special sort of presence in the state. The Riverhead facility in New York is always going to come up in conversation, because the second that New York flips to allowing wholesale, which it needs to, by the way, not just from a commercial point of view, but there are a lot of people consuming unsafe product in that city right now. And I'm a New Yorker, and that's bananas. Like,
you want to hear a story?
I'm the biggest advocate for the regulated market, for the legal market, not because of my own self-interest, but the fact that the product that people are consuming should be tested. It should pass certain standards, and then it should be consumed. The black market, from a contaminant standpoint, is one of the worst things that we have that's out there right now from a risk perspective.
We were speaking last week. There was a company based out of Chicago. They were in New York and went to one of these black market legal dispensaries in Manhattan. And when they walked in, it was raided 20 minutes before they had come in. And the store owner basically said, "Hold on, don't leave. I got product for you." And he went out back and came out front with a garbage bag and started taking product out of a garbage bag.
Great. I think the scariest part about that is not just the contaminant that's inherently in the product, which we all know, right? Like, you can have just naturally bad product in cannabis. Where this product is being stored and how it's being transported, I don't want to be an alarmist, but we have a fentanyl problem in this country. And
no kidding.
That is terrifying. And so like I've had friends who have reached out and been like, yo, my kids are starting college in this city, or they're, and I tell them, do not shop anywhere where you cannot see a COA on a product. Like, just, it's not worth it. Just put extra money in their checking account for them to be able to shop at a legal dispensary, because it's, don't put them in a position where they have to make a choice to buy illicit product.
We've heard too many of those stories recently, haven't we?
Yeah. It's so look, the Riverhead facility, I think, is incredible, because to me, if we do this right from a New York regs point of view, there should be an incredible retail network of social equity and small business. Let's supply them with product that's safe, but also at scale, so that we can drive the cost down and compete with the illicit market. Because in New York City, if you can buy an eighth for, take your pick, $20 off the back of a bike messenger, and it comes right to your apartment, or you can get out, ride the subway, walk 6 blocks, go to one of 4 or 5 legal dispensaries right now and pay 3 times as much. That's a tough sale for a consumer.
Yeah. And it's sophisticated. I mean, I've been in New York before where a guy shows up in 10 minutes with a tackle box, and it's got 710 Labs, Alien Labs, cookies, all the prime brands,
baked goods, like, I mean, just whatever you want. Yeah.
Vapes, baked goods, edibles, pre-rolls, flour, everything. And I'm like, this is impressive, but it's probably knockoff product at the end of the day in fake packaging, which I have no interest in consuming.
Yeah.
Jesse, the legal market though is winning though. Are they not? Like the progress that we're making?
I mean, I always joke around. I'm like, how many old timers do you see out on the street rolling their own cigarette, and how many people are still buying, bathtub gin? Like, yes, the legal market will win. Like, sanity will prevail. Safe product and, sophisticated forms and formulations with regards to manufactured product and stuff like that is going to be well thought out and well created will absolutely win. But again, when I said ridiculous, when you asked me one sentence, like New York right now, ridiculous, like what we're dealing with. Yeah. So I think that is unfortunately one of the themes right now for the industry.
Yeah. Worked at a media company, worked on brands like NBC.
Yep.
Were you with YouTube as well?
We worked with we worked with just about everybody. So we were at one point, we were one of only about 4 or 5 technology companies in the world that had programmatic access to all of the APIs of the big social networks. So, working with Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, sort of across the board. So that gave us an incredible insight and incredible access to working with all of these big brands and networks.
We see 30-second ads during the NFL Sunday football games in the future?
In the future, not anytime soon. And there's 2 things that you're fighting against. Number one is obviously the rules that govern those buys right now from a TV point of view. Number 2 is they're not cheap. And so, if my CEO is coming to me right now going, hey, do you think we should spend $15 million or whatever on a 60-second spot on the Super Bowl? I'm going to look at him and be like, I don't think we can get away with that.
If you're going to do that, you better make sure you do it consistently. That's where it adds up in a hurry, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So how important do you think digital, being able to leverage social, more importantly, is in the future of cannabis marketing?
I think social is important because it provides you an opportunity to get about as close to one-to-one marketing as you're going to get. So if you step away from text, which we have massive issues with as an industry, right? It's prohibitively expensive and incredible carrier fees and low delivery rates, right? The 2 things that you really have to turn to outside of email, you really have to turn to push notifications. So, we have the most widely downloaded app right now for loyalty as a multi-state operator with Stash Cash. I think it was like the number 5 healthcare app on iOS, right? So it had incredible adoption from a download point of view. So push notifications on something like Stash Cash, incredibly, high delivery rate, and your consumer. Outside of that, to be able to take those sort of those profiles and those data sets and then create custom audiences or lookalike audiences into a social platform and find those new profiles to advertise to. It's incredibly cost efficient. And it's about as close as you're going to get to one-to-one.
We're getting there. We're getting there incrementally. I know we had I forget who it was, but Spotify started allowing cannabis ads. I'm sure Instagram and Meta will warm up.
Twitter's there, right? Like, or X, like they're.
But the problem with it, I mean, being an advertiser, the Twitter ad platform is like hell on earth from a self-service ad platform perspective. It's
I'm not.
I've never been able to leverage it.
I'm not going to say anything because I was there when they built it. So I will. Yeah, I'd like to keep some friends in that industry.
Yeah.
Oh, Shad, I think you might be muted.
Chad, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, 4 years that you've been in this industry. You know, you touched on the top about how you went to that store, that dispensary store in Florida, and how it looked like resembled an insurance company. If I walk into that same store today, what's changed?
A lot. One, you drive down the road and it says cannabis. You're like, I 100% know what they sell. Nah, no question there.
Yeah,
And then two, when you walk into it, aesthetically, it's just a very different feeling. I think the most common thing that people say when they walk into a cannabis, the feedback that we usually get is, this feels too nice to be a dispensary. And I'm okay with that because we'll grow into that, right? Like there'll be a time when that will be the expectation. So, I'd rather be out in front of that and not having to reinvest in infrastructure. If you're going to do it once, do it right the first time. And so I think that, we're good with that. We wanted it to feel like part sort of speakeasy,
yeah,
like very sort of sophisticated, and part like living room. So where like sit down and hang out for a minute and have a conversation. There's couches and chairs in every one of the dispensaries because it's like, if you're talking with someone on the floor and it's like, well, hold on, let me grab an iPad, let's sit, make it comfortable. And so I think that that's probably what you would notice as a difference between what it used to be and what it is now.
Well, we're heading over to Brooklyn. We're heading to
Nice.
New York in a couple weeks.
Court Street.
Anthony and I are going to be in person. We're trying to figure that out with your team. Just as far as, are you going to be? Where are you based? In New York?
I'm just outside of Atlanta. We relocated
you're Atlanta, okay.
like every other New Yorker right in the beginning of the pandemic.
So I think we want to film a podcast from the actual dispensary. I think that would be actually kind of cool. So I don't know if Nicholas is going to be there to give us the walk around, but if there's ever a place you think about culture, you think of Brooklyn, New York, right?
100%. 100%. It's that's a great location. So I think you'll have a good experience there. It's a good place to set up. You'll get to see some of the technology live. You'll get to see some of the merchandising with the product. We try to make it feel, even in a market like that, where it is very regulated with what you can do as far as the shopping experience. I think when you walk in there, it's going to feel like a store. So it should be well presented, well merchandised. Even though it's dummy packaging, you'll get the feel that you're actually in a store.
Yeah. There's all people from all walks of life, different gender, demographics that are coming. I always look at the female, the moms actually leading a lot of this growth child potential for this overall industry.
Yeah.
Like, are you seeing outside of flower when it comes to like edible consumption and shopping and just, overall curiosity and information? Like, how much of a demographic do you think best suits that edible like world, where I think that's a huge growth opportunity that pertains to the industry in the short term? And then later on, I think beverages.
I absolutely agree with you. I think, there's a lot that we don't know about the way that this industry is going to develop. Like I always get a kick out of it when people make these like very definitive predictions. And I'm like, yeah, I'm rooting for you. I think it's the one thing that we know is that it's going to change. Right. So if you look at the growth of, product segmentation, SKU segmentation in a mature adult use market versus an early medical, you start to see the compression of like loose flower, right? You start to see the emergence of convenience like pre-rolls. You start to see a larger emergence of, vaporization products or discrete consumption, right? So ingestibles, edibles, things like that. I think we know that those products over-index with certain audiences, and those audiences are going to over-index as the new entrants into our industry. So if you do the math, right, like the 1 + 1 = 3, you're going to see some pretty big change with regards to that product assortment in dispensaries and what it is that we're leaning into from a manufactured point of view. I think the other thing is everything that you mentioned there, I can create a consistent brand experience across the country because those are formulated and manufactured products.
Yeah.
You can't really do that with flower. I'm going to be the one to make the argument that you shouldn't. And I know that most people in my position say like, oh, we absolutely want to be, the Coca-Cola of cannabis or the this of flower. I don't think I think flower is nuanced and varied. If you're a consumer of it, you actually appreciate that. You know what I mean?
You're one of the only people that's ever been on the show to actually draw that differentiation.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important because if you know the industry and you know the flower, the flower that you're buying in Colorado or California, it pretty much cannot be grown in Florida.
Agreed.
To the same specifications.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the same terpene profile. You're not going to get the same yield.
Yeah.
These are complete different environments. And I mean, I think that's important. But all of the consumers that I know, that weren't cannabis consumers that have now come into being cannabis consumers, they don't smoke.
Agreed.
It's edibles. It's edibles, and it's discrete, like you said, just discrete consumables is what they've done. And it's low dose edibles. I've seen get them every single time.
Dude.
And the first brand they buy, they stay with it.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and look, here's the thing. Flower is not going away for a couple of generations of buyers, right? Like it will still be a part of our culture as an industry. But to your point, the people that are going to buy that understand, and again, I probably outed myself, right? But the people that are going to buy that understand that's okay. Like I don't want Maui Wowie that wasn't grown in volcanic ash, right? Like I want, what do you grow up here? Oh, you've got this, you know, this great lemon sour diesel strain that's like super legacy to the Northeast that has been here forever. Awesome. If I'm in New York, that's what I want to buy, or a White Widow or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm with you. And I think that's okay. I think the brands for flower should be built around the expectations of quality, terp profile, testing brackets, lifestyle association. Like you buy this is absolute gas. You're not getting off the couch for the next hour. You buy this, you can go take a walk around Manhattan and put the headphones in and enjoy the day. Right. So I think that's okay. And that's how we try to focus on our flower brands, to be honest.
How excited are you for this industry?
I'm really excited. I mean, it's you know, it's like I get made fun of all the time because I'm always like, hey, this is great. Like we'll figure it out. Right. But at the end of the day, other than DeFi, AI, and cannabis, I don't see that many other industries out there where there is a definitive rising tide, all boats over the next 5 years, where we are just going to, right? Like it's almost like unavoidable. And that's what we saw with social too, to be fair, right? Like we saw this unavoidable wave of adoption. Like it went from being like where moms went to look at pictures of their grandkids and college kids went to hook up with each other and play Farmville or whatever was happening, to like the largest ad network on the planet. Right.
Yeah.
And so when I look at our industry, this is going to be one of the largest consumer industries in our country in the next 10 years. It's going to outpace everything when it comes to growth. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're still making it up. It's fun to work in this space. It's tough, but it's fun if you embrace that chaos. And so I'm incredibly excited about it. I mean, I hope I get to stick around for it. You got to hit some numbers, but you know, I hope I get to be here.
I think that's what it is when we hear time and time again. It is tough, but people are just so passionate about it. And I think that's, you know, one of the reasons why we launched our platform. Like, you know, cannabis is different now. It's a lifestyle. People are getting educated. It's not just about, you know, some people don't like to smoke joints. Okay, well, how about this beverage? How about this edible? And it's becoming more socially acceptable. And it's becoming more and more of a lifestyle from what I've seen in the amount of years that we've covered this. But I think the whole reason why we wanted to do what we wanted to do is like, look, this industry isn't about buying weed from a guy with a broken iPhone screen and, you know, buying shit in your back alley. And a lot of the content creators, I think when it came to, especially on the business side, it was like, we need to really represent and understand what this industry is about, what the growth opportunity is, and more importantly, bring over a lot of thought leaders like yourselves to educate people on where this industry is going. So listen, this has been great. And I appreciate the feedback.
Absolutely, man. It's great to catch up with you guys. I watch the show, so it's fun.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's.
You like it? Any feedback?
No, I think it's great. I mean, I you know,
some constructive criticism. We're all good. We're all good.
You know, selfishly, I like that you guys are expanding and you're opening up this to more conversations around more sort of domain areas and more subject matter expertise that sort of rounds it out, right? Like I think, you know, I know when I tune in, I'm going to hear something interesting from a finance point of view or like a brass tacks business point of view. And I think that there's a ton of value in that. But I think there are so many passionate people and so many subject matter experts across all of these companies, right? Not just cannabis, like all these companies that are bringing some incredible experience. I mean, I was just talking with
well, think about theater of the mind, Jesse. It's like everything you're explaining about that store in Florida.
Yeah.
First thing that comes to my mind is that we got to get on an airplane to get down there and film at that store in Florida to kind of bring that to life.
I'll meet you.
I'll be there in about 30 minutes.
Right, exactly. But my point is like, I think, you know, and you know this, working in the media, nobody wants to see a 3.5 minute interview because you got to cut to a 2-minute commercial break. Nobody wants to see that anymore.
I know.
And how many times have you seen in interviews, especially in this industry, where you get executives on that say to the people at, you know, some of the major networks, We'd love it if we could have your crew out so we could film you and show you exactly what we're doing. And that's the opportunity, I think, that so many people, whether you're a consumer or an investor in this space, they want to see what you're building visually.
I think it's great. I hope that you guys do it. I'd love to meet you at some of these locations and, walk through stuff with you guys, because we are passionate about it. We're excited about it. I know that there's people at the other companies that will feel the same way. So the more that you guys can do that stuff, I think people will respond, right? I mean, Rogan's the biggest podcast in the world, because in my opinion, the reason why is because he approaches every conversation with intellectual curiosity. And he's sort of like, tell me what I don't know. Right. And I think the way that you guys approach these conversations is very similar. So if you start doing that on location and showing people the behind the scenes, I think people are going to love it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine old school television? Good evening and welcome to the 6 o'clock news.
Welcome to the.
Why should I invest in your company?
Yes. Well, there are still conversations that happen like that. Let's be honest.
I'm sure there are, but hey, we're growing. But listen, fascinating to meet people like yourselves that have incredible resumes in the background, and like, you taking a chance in life. But every single time I hear it, it's just like, we're so passionate about this industry, huge growth opportunity. It's tough, but man, let's just go for a wild ride, because that's what life's all about, right?
I'm with you. So I'm here until they kick me out. I'll be here.
All right. Well, listen, we're going to be in Brooklyn next month. We probably won't see you. If you are around, we'd love to see you. If not, we'll take lots of pictures. We'll give a shout out to you while we're there. And most importantly, let's keep in touch.
You got it. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. We appreciate all your feedback. So if you want to leave some comments, let us know what you think and what you want to learn of. Subscribe to our channel by clicking here. If you want to see more videos like this, then click here, because at the end of the day, we would not be here without you. Thanks for watching, everyone.